President Trump telling reporters at his first solo news conference since the election that the massive tax code overhaul is to come. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan says the revisions are necessary. Watch.
Go back and read the books that are written about the 1986 tax reform. That was the last time we did tax reform. It's going to be up, it's going to be down, it's going to be on, it's going to be off. You're going to hear, you're going to report 150 stories on tax reform's fate between now and when we get tax reform done. We are doing tax reform. Tax reform is going to happen. And do you know why tax reform is going to happen? Because it has to happen.
Joining me right now is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Tom Donohue. Tom, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
You've been singing this song for as long as I know you, that we need to see tax reform. But of course, the upset now is about this border adjustment tax. That's most likely going to be part of the president's new tax plan. What are the implications, Tom?
Well, I think if you just heard from the Speaker of the House, there are going to be 150 stories about what's in it and what's not in it. And I think we have to hear the details, because when you get finished with this, down at the end of the year, it's going to be like putting a puzzle together. And my advice to the people from American corporations, large and small, is get at the table, stay at the table all the way to the end. And that's the greatest chance of getting the best mix of improvements for companies of every size and shape. If you leave the table, if you get mad and take a walk, you're liable to end up on the menu. I believe it can happen. I believe there are going to be 4 or 5 different plans to start. But if we stay at the table, we'll get there, and it'll be a lot better than people think.
So, you know, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget yesterday, Tom, came out with a report, 5 reasons to pay for tax reform. And that is why there is this debate about the border adjustment tax. They say it's going to raise $1 trillion over 10 years, and you can't just cut taxes without raising revenue. You say what?
I say, where are you going to get $1 trillion over 10 years for that, and how many other issues?
You don't believe it?
No. What I also think it's important to take one quick minute and look at that ugly gorilla behind us, which are entitlement costs and interest on the debt. So when you hear people talking about how they're going to change our spending plans, they're only talking about 30% of everything we spend. The other 70% is over there. If you do tax reform in the right way, you'll move towards economic growth. We have had now 10-plus years of drag economic growth. We finished last year at like 1.6% growth. You can't hire people. You can't improve taxes. You can't improve health care. You can't do infrastructure unless you get the growth going, and do it soon. Tax reform will help.
Okay, but you're bringing up something that has not been brought up in this whole conversation, Tom, and that is the entitlements. The president has been very clear. He's not going to take away something that's been promised to the people. So the entitlement gorilla behind you that you refer to has not been part of this conversation. And if that comes into the conversation, I don't know if that mucks up the idea of doing tax reform in 2017. What do you think?
Well, I raised the issue. We've been trying to raise the issue for a long time. In 4 or 5 years, it won't be 70%. It'll be 80% of everything we spend. You can do things in tax reform that will fundamentally increase the size and growth of the economy. You can do things in tax reform that'll put us in a position to deal with this gorilla and to deal with the other challenges of health care and of entitlements, and of infrastructure. We have got to do it. There is no question there's going to be a need for other money. The key is to find the places to get it where it doesn't strangle the economy and then cause something worse than we're thinking about.
Right, which is why the border adjustment tax is being debated here. Let me ask you, Tom, if we were to see a corporate tax rate at, let's say, 20%, because that's the GOP plan, do you believe that will move the needle on economic growth? What are the implications for business of a 20% tax rate down from 35% currently?
Well, your comment of what are the implications for business are critical. Particularly starting off, what are the implications for small businesses that drive a lot of hiring? Then what are the implications for large companies, which can have a major part on investment? investment, along with the reduction of regulations, which this administration has started out very quickly on, is going to make a much, much more aggressive economic situation and a lot of growth. But right now, everybody's excited. They're looking at this change in regulation. They're hearing they may get a tax adjustment, an improvement. If we get that, we'll get a lot of economic growth. And I'd like to look at all these problems you and I are talking about with a 3.5%, 4% economic growth for a few years. There'll be a lot more solutions than there are now.
What's more important in terms of the impact on business and economic growth? Is it taxes or is it the rollback in regulation, Tom? Because when you speak with businesses, they're as optimistic about getting the shackles off of them in terms of all of the regulations that have been put in place just in the last 3 years, by the way. They've been sitting on cash, unwilling to do new investment, create new jobs, because they don't know what's around the corner in terms of compliance and regulatory fees.
Well, obviously, regulation is the quickest and easiest thing to do. And along with that, it appears we're going to do, for the first time in 70 years, is change the rules on how regulations are formed, how they're reviewed, and how it's made sure that they're for the benefit of the economy, not just for the benefit of somebody's idea of what they think is important.
Yeah.
To answer your question, they're both very important. It appears to me regulations moving quickly, tax reform is going to take a year. You do that, it'll sequence in a way. The more we do on regulation, the more courage we'll have on tax reform.
Yeah, I mean, we had a guest on earlier, Keith Banks from Merrill Lynch and U.S. Trust, who said we're going to see double-digit earnings growth in 2017 without tax reform. But he thinks tax reform hits in 2018, which will increase earnings even that much more. Real quick on this question, because I want to move on to the veteran federal attorney, Alexander Acosta. But do you think tax reform happens in 17 or 18?
Well, that's a very good question, because as you listen to the speaker and others, this is going to take a good part of a year.
Yeah.
It's either going to happen at the end of 17 or the beginning of 18, and, you know, there might be some advantages one way or the other. But, you know,
so
we're
then
not going to...
the question is it retroactive to 17, to the beginning of 17? So
yeah, well, if you stay at the table and you get to the end, you'll be a part of making that decision.
All right.